Hello, welcome to the Broadcast Network. My name is Tom. I'm part of the team at Broadcast. And what we want to do at Broadcast is be a conversation partner for those who are on the front lines of ministry. So we know pioneering for God can be a lonely thing to do, and we want to be a voice in the conversation with you, talking about the whole range of things that come up as you're stepping out, whether it's leadership, pioneering, mission, cross-cultural things. And today we are talking about church planting. We are live on YouTube, so please do subscribe to this channel for more from us. Give the video a like and do share it with others as well. We're also live on our podcast channel, so hi to everyone listening in on the podcast. Do give us a rating and review. It does make a big difference for us. We are looking at the foundations of church planting from a biblical point of view. Why is it that we do what we do? What's the rationale in the scriptures? And this is part 2 of our series. Last time we looked at the mission of God in the world. Church planting isn't something that comes first and foremost from us, but it ties in to the mission that God has for creation. God is a God of love. God is a God who gives of himself, and for all eternity he has done so. The Father pouring out love to the Son responding with love to the Father, all in the unity of the Spirit. And the creation of the world was the overflow of that love. And we see as God created humanity as the crowning point of that creation. He made us in his image, and he gave those first humans a mandate to subdue the earth and to fill it. God's vision was for a global community that reflects him, and with him at the center. And we see this play out through the Old Testament scriptures into the New Testament, and the Great Commission to make disciples of all nations is part of this same mission, until we see in that glorious picture of Revelation a countless multitude from every nation, tribe and tongue worshipping around the throne. What we're going to do in this session though is focusing on why then do we build church. Like, if God's mission is to see more and more disciples made, why church? Why not just go evangelize individuals, tell a person the gospel, see them connected to God, go on to the next person? Why are we bringing people into this community, this gathering that we call the church? What's the purpose of that in God's big picture? And there are lots of answers we could give. There are some very good practical, strategic answers to that question. How are we actually best going to multiply? How do we reach new people? When we do it together, it multiplies our resources. That's one answer we might give. There's merit in that for sure. How do we help people persevere in the faith? Keep going when times are hard. Well, being around other people who can encourage them in their faith, who can witness to them, who can challenge them, rebuke them, teach them, and guide them. All of that, again, is a merit for building church. How do we prevent people going off the rails in their doctrine, like hearing a false idea and being led astray? Again, the guardrails of a community can help with that. There are lots of good strategic reasons for building church, for building community. But our purpose here isn't to look at the strategic, but to look at the theological. Like, why from God's purpose and from understanding the scriptures. And the way I want to come at this is to reflect on some of the images that the New Testament gives us for what the church is like. There are different pictures in the New Testament, and I think as we reflect on a few of them, we will see God's heart for the church, God's reason for the church. Why is it that we're planting church, not just reaching individuals? And the first one I want to look at is one that maybe doesn't always get included in these lists. When people talk about the images of the church in the New Testament, this one doesn't always get included, but I think it is pivotal. I think it's the central guiding image, really. It's found in John 17, and it's God himself, like the Trinitarian nature of God as a picture for the church. So this is in the high priestly prayer of Jesus. He prays for the disciples who were with him at the time, and then he goes on to pray for future disciples as well. And this is his prayer. He says, I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one, Father. Just as you are in me, and I am in you, may they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. I've given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one, as we are one, I in them, and you in me, so that they may be brought to complete unity. Then the world will know that you sent me, and have loved them even as you love me. Now, if at any point in that you lost track of who loves who is in who, then you can be forgiven for that. I think that might be kind of the point. There's an intertwinedness between the Father and the Son, then the Son and the church, and then believer and believer. There's an interconnectedness of relationships that Jesus is praying for there. But at the heart of it, what we have is a prayer for the church to be one, for Christians to be one with one another, just as the Father and the Son are one. Isn't that mind-blowing? That what Jesus desires for my unity with my brother and sister at church, to be like his unity with the Father. Wow. There's something bigger going on than just the salvation of a single individual and another single individual, an isolated specific people, each connected to God. No, there's a creation of a relationship that Jesus is willing to liken to the Trinitarian relationship. It's God's very community growing and being expanded onto the earth, and the Trinity is the model for that. When we think about the Trinity, we're not thinking, well, there's the Father, there's the Son, and there's the Spirit, and that's the end of the story. No, there's the Father, the Son, and the Spirit in loving relationships with one another. And those relationships between Father, Son, and Spirit are as much a part of our understanding of the nature of God in Trinity as the persons themselves. We need both the persons and the relationships to really grasp what we mean when we say God is Trinity. And in a similar way, in the church, it's the persons who are saved and brought into Christ, and the relationships between them, reflecting those relationships of the Trinity, that we mean as well. The corporate church is a reflection of God's own nature, and in such, it's a witness to the world. Such that Jesus can say, when you love each other, people will know you are my disciples. They see something in that relationship in the church that draws their eyes to him as the Saviour, the one who's always, as the eternal Son, been in that relationship with the Father in the Spirit. You see, this is more than just an individual thing. It comes from the very nature of God himself. Well, a second image that we're given in the New Testament for the church is that of the bride of Christ. The church is the bride. In the book of Ephesians, chapter 1, it speaks about God's plan to bring unity to all things in heaven and on earth under Christ. So God is bringing a unity out of everything. But in particular, what is being formed is a bride. God is bringing together a bride for his Son. And later on in the letter, it goes on to talk about husbands and wives. It's giving some guidance for how the gospel shapes our lives, how we live it out in different areas. And it's addressing the different relationships that we have. So it's speaking to husbands and wives how to relate to one another. But at the end of the section, it says, but this is about Christ and the church. The way a human marriage is conducted is a pointer, is a reflection, is a consequence of the relationship between Jesus and the church. That's the higher level relationship, you could say, that their marriage gets its identity from this relationship between Christ and the church. Revelation picks up on this same thing about the bride of Christ. In chapter 19, it talks about how the wedding of the Lamb has come and his bride has made herself ready, and says, blessed are those who are invited to the wedding supper of the Lamb. Later on in chapter 21, it says, I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. There's this kind of picture as Jesus returns of the wedding feast of the Lamb and his bride. And the bride is speaking about the church. But there's something about this imagery of the church as a bride that is an intrinsically collective thing. There is one bride, not many brides. It's a bride who's been brought together. It's not like Jesus is the groom and each individual Christian is a bride, as though Jesus has many brides. That's not how godly marriage works, is it? There's one groom and there is one bride. So something about being brought together is stepping into this eschatological reality of the church as the bride. And I think this does actually make a difference to how we think of some of the images of intimacy. Intimacy perhaps is an image that in some circles of the church is neglected. Maybe in other circles can be emphasized too much. But where it's neglected, sometimes there's a wariness of kind of personalizing it, which I think perhaps is a rightness to it, though we do step in as part of the bride. We are part of the bride, so we together receive this intimacy of Jesus as the groom. And there's a uniting of us to step into this. And if this is the bride that God's creating for his son for eternity, then doesn't it make sense that this is what we would be labouring to build in the here and now as well, as we're stepping out with God into his mission? Our next picture I want to look at, again, it comes from the book of Ephesians, is the idea of the church as the one new humanity. We've seen in Revelation that picture around the throne, people from every tribe, every tongue, and every nation. That's where things are heading. And this is a reality that God is bringing about through the gospel. He's bringing together people from different cultures and different backgrounds because of what Jesus has done. In chapter 2, it speaks about the effect of the cross on both Jews and Gentiles. Jews who looked to the law for their salvation but could not keep the law, could not be saved through the law, so were saved through grace, that Jesus had kept the law on their behalf, that he died for their sins, and that through the cross he'd made a way that through faith in him they could be saved. And for the Gentiles, he'd made a way, despite their many sins, he dealt with the sins so that by grace, through faith in him, they can be saved. And salvation of both groups is the same way. And one new person has been brought out of these two who were once separate. In verse 14 of chapter 2, it says, he himself is our peace, who's made of the two groups one and destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility, by setting aside in his flesh the law with its commands and its regulations. His purpose was to create in himself one new humanity out of the two, thus making peace, and in one body to reconcile both of them to God through the cross. And the initial application here is to Jews and Gentiles. But the implication goes wider than that. Peoples who were separated on earth, brought together through the gospel, different cultures, different ethnicities, different social classes, people of all different backgrounds who on earthly terms may not associate, may historically have seen one another as enemies, are now brought into one humanity. Together we're united through the cross. And in this, the wisdom of God is shown. In chapter 3, it says his intent was that now through the church, the manifold wisdom of God should be made known to the rulers and the authorities in the heavenly realms. You see, God is putting his wisdom on display in the cosmos through what he's doing in the church of making this one new man. The reconciled church is the cosmic revelation of God's character and his purposes. And so when we prioritize the individual, when we just go after individuals getting saved, we miss this whole dimension of God's wisdom being put on display cosmically, of the making of peace, of the bringing together of what was far away. Yes, we're emphasizing peace between people and God, but we're missing the peace between people and people, as those who were enemies are now made brothers and sisters and are treating each other in that way. And the one new humanity reflected in our churches is a glorious truth that we emphasize. Next, the New Testament talks about the church as a temple of the Holy Spirit. Again, Ephesians says, in him you too are being built together to become a dwelling in which God lives by the Spirit. The corporate church is a dwelling place of God. See, in the Old Testament, they had the temple. Before that, they had the tabernacle, and even things like the Garden of Eden would have the same kind of function, where it was a space in which the presence of God would come and humans could meet with God there. Now, obviously, because of sin, that was a difficult thing. So there were kind of boundaries and restrictions, who could come how near and with what sacrifices. It was a restricted presence, but still it was the place of the presence of God. In the New Testament, we see Jesus is the temple, the walking temple, where before there were people who could not go in. Now the temple will go to them. It's an incredible feature of the ministry of Jesus. But then as we come into the New Testament epistles, we see who's described as the temple now. It's the church. We together are the temple. The corporate church is being built into this temple, Ephesians said, and we're like the bricks that make this dwelling place. And by the Spirit, God dwells within us. Now, there are also moments in the New Testament where the temple imagery is used of people individually, like specifically applied to the body, when it's encouraging people to live with a sexual morality that flows from the gospel. But it's used in a slightly different way, as it's talking about the corporate church being built together. And it's collectively, there's a sense in which it's us, the church together, that really experiences being the dwelling place of God. There's a way in which we encounter the presence of God when we're together that is just different to how we experience his presence when we're each on our own. And again, if we're just focusing on the individual salvations, we miss that. We do want to see individuals saved, but saved and added, saved and brought in, saved and built in to be bricks in this temple by which we all together meet with God. By a similar token, the church is called the body of Christ. We're all different body parts. Some of us are hands, some are feet, some are eyes, some are ears, some are noses. We all have different spiritual gifts, such that no one of us can do everything that's needed to bring God's mission to fruition in the world, to build his kingdom, to see his church thrive. None of us can do it on our own, but together God's equipped his body, his people, his church with everything that is needed, which means we need one another. In 1 Corinthians chapter 12, it says, the eye can't say to the hand, I don't need you. And the head can't say to the feet, I don't need you. Yeah, sometimes that's what we see, isn't it? As people want to kind of step out of church, de-emphasize church. Well, it's just me and God. I'll be fine by myself. What they're doing is saying to the other parts of the body, no, I'm fine. I've got what I need and I don't need you. But the verse goes on to say, no, on the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. And the parts we think are less honourable, we treat with special honour. Often when we want to kind of reject association with the church or with other believers, it can come from this place of despising, come from this sense of, well, no, I'm fine. I've got what I need and they're not really, they won't add anything to me. They're just a bit to be looked down on. I've got this kind of superiority over them. But the verse was saying, no, it's those who seem weaker or less honourable, we should be treating with special honour, because through the body, through the different parts, that's how the Spirit works in the world. Jesus is the head, and by his Spirit, together as we're all using our different gifts to come together in his purposes, that's how we see God working in the world. And so we want to see the church thriving and flourishing and built up. Next, the church is called the flock of Christ. This imagery is picked up in John chapter 10, also through in 1 Peter as well. And it's creating a sense of care and protection and provision that the shepherd will give to the flock. And this is part of the instruction for those who are leaders within the church as well, that we get in some sense to share in the shepherding role of Christ. But he is the good shepherd. We are his flock. And there's a togetherness created by this image. The way a shepherd leads a flock is together. And the way a wolf would try to operate is to isolate a lone sheep, to pick them off. They'll be more vulnerable. They'll be more exposed to danger and to attack. And so there's something in seeing the flock together by which shepherding can take place. When Jesus tells the story of the lost sheep, the shepherd didn't say, well, it's all right off on its own. I'll just make sure there's a good pen for it to be in, kind of over there, separate to the rest, and make sure it's got food. It's like, no, I'm going to bring it back to be with the others, because the sheep will thrive together in the space I've created for them. And so the collective church are the recipients of the protection and the provision of the Good Shepherd. And the final image I want to focus on in this session is the church as the Royal Priesthood. This is an image that was first spoken in Exodus over the people of Israel. But Peter picks it up in 1 Peter chapter 2 and applies it to Christians. Says this is true of the church, that you are a chosen people, you're a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness and into his wonderful light. The role of a priest is an outward-looking one. It's a mediatorial role. It's standing between people and God. And so it's representing God to people. And the church does this in mission, in evangelism, in going, sharing the good news of God with people. That's a representing of God to people. And representing people to God through intercession, through prayer, through carrying the needs of people to God in prayer. Now we know Jesus is the great high priest. He's the mediator in the ultimate sense. It's by his blood that people and God are reconciled. The church doesn't do that. But the church is called to be this royal priesthood, standing for God before people and standing for people before God. And this is something that we do together. We are called to be God's evangelism strategy, not just isolated disciples going out doing this, but a church that's called to be the royal priesthood together. It's the corporate church that's the means by which God spreads his good news in the world. Now there's 7 images, and on each one of them there are lessons to learn. There's kind of rich imagery there. But when you combine all of them together, what you see is a biblical vision of the church that will really push us away from those isolated views that we might want to have. And they start to flesh out the vision that we started looking at in the previous session, that God's mission is to see a community formed, a people at which he is the center, which truly loves God, which truly loves the neighbor as itself, and to see the world filled with this kind of community, not just individuals who've repented and believed, but individuals who've repented and believed and been brought into the community that God is building, that is called the church. Now, what we need to do next, and this will be our next session, so do come back and follow along and listen to that one as well. It's okay, but why plant new churches? It's one thing to say we're trying to build a community, and I can see maybe why when you're going into a totally new place you do this. But why within our regions, our cities, our towns, the places that we are, would we then go down the road and see a new church started? And to answer that, we'll look at the shape of the ministry of Jesus himself, Jesus the pioneer. So do come back and check us out for that. We will be there soon. In the meantime, have a great one, and we will be back soon.